The next kind of control statement that we're going to look at is a switch statement. And a switch statement is a statement that allows us to evaluate the value of some variable or some statement, some expression, and based on that value, do different things for different values. So a good example of a way that we can test this is we can have our print statement print a certain number of copies, and based on that number of copies we're going to print out the model number and then is on or off that many times. So let's go ahead and modify our print statement so that it'll take in a number of copies. So we'll put int copies here, and this will be the number of copies, and then we can use a switch statement by calling switch, and then what we want to switch on, we want to switch on the number of copies. And then what we'll do now is inside of our block here, we're going to provide cases for the different cases that could exist. So case of 0, we can do something. And for each one of these case statements, we need to provide a way to get out of this, either to return or break, so that we don't fall through. Because a switch statement, what will happen is, if we have a case 0 and a case 1 here, if our number of copies that comes in is 0, it's going to execute the code that we put after this case 0, and then it's going to go right on to case 1. It basically falls through in Java. So this can be useful if we want to utilize this in a switch statement, but if not, we can use this break statement, which we'll cover a little bit more in detail later when we get into loops. But for now, we can just know that you'll need to put a break statement after each case if you don't want it to fall through. So I've got a case 0 and a case 1 here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put after this case what I want to happen in the code. So we're going to do something that's a little inefficient here for now, and then we're going to make it more efficient when we get into loops. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to put our code that prints here, but I'm going to put this only for the case of 1. So in the case of 1, then we'll print this statement once, either the on or the off. In the case of 0, we're not going to do anything. Let's go ahead and add another case here. I'm going to add a case of 2. If the copies amount is 2, then we're going to print this twice. And if it's off, we'll print this twice. And again, this is very inefficient what we're doing here, but I just want to demonstrate to you how the case works and then show you how a loop will help to make this code a lot cleaner later on. Right now we're programming without a loop, and that's why this is going to be a little bit messy here. The other thing that you can do with a switch statement is you can have a default case. So if it doesn't match 0 or 1 or 2, then we can choose to use the keyword default, and this is a special case. This default case is going to get hit if it doesn't match any of the cases that are here. So if our copies is passed in as a 3, it's not going to hit 0, it's not going to hit 1, it's not going to hit 2, it's going to hit the default here. In this case, we're going to print out number of copies is not supported. So if anyone picks a number greater than 2, we're just not going to be able to print that out. We're just going to say that it's not supported. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. We'll have to go in and we'll have to modify our call to print because we've required a parameter now. If you remember, we've added this copies parameter. So let's make a copies of 0 and see what happens. I'll run this and you can see nothing has happened because what has occurred here is we passed in a 0 here, we switched on copies, which was 0, and because it was 0, it went to this case 0 and it did nothing. It just broke out of the switch statement. So now let's try print 1 for 1 copy. We get my printer is on because the printer is set to on. And what we can see has happened here is it switched on copies. Copies was 1. We have a case 1. It executed everything here until the break. Then it broke out. Let's go ahead and try print 2. And you can see it's printed my printer is on twice. And that's because when we went into our switch, the copies was 2. It hit this case. It hit this is on statement, and then it simply printed out twice. And again, this is not very efficient because we're repeating a lot of code. We have a lot of code duplication here, and that's because we don't have the ability to use a loop because we haven't learned about that yet. But once we get to a loop, we're going to be able to clean that up. Now let's give a number that's greater than 2. Let's put 50 here and see what happens. You can see number of copies is not supported because it's hit this default case. And let's see what would happen if we took away one of these break statements. Let's say that you forgot on case 2 to put a break statement here. So let's delete this. Now we'll go back and we'll make it so that we try to print 2 copies. And we'll run this. And you can see it actually hit the statement for 2, but then it went right on and hit the default statement. It fell through. So it's very important to remember to put a break statement or some kind of return, something to stop it. Otherwise, it'll just fall all the way through. And sometimes the behavior you want, for example, if you wanted to do the same thing for, let's say, 1 and 5, we could actually do case 1, case 5 here, and you can see either 1 or 5 is going to execute this code right here. So I'll go ahead and switch this to a 5 now, and you can see that it still did what 1 had done before. So a switch statement basically lets you switch based on the value of some value, and if you're using Java 7, you can actually switch on a string. So you could put a string here and not just a number, but if you're using an earlier version of Java, it'll have to be an integer to switch on. And you can see here that we could make our numbers go up to any number up here, and we could provide cases for any number of values that we wanted to. And we always have this capability of creating this default case. And we don't need a break here on the default case because there's nothing for it to fall through to.